This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Kenya rejects the ICJ's ruling over a maritime border dispute with Somalia. The investigation into last year's BEIRUT port explosion is suspended yet again over a legal challenge. And the UN calls for investigations into the use of force by Libyan authorities against migrants. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, a slow rollout of COVID-19 vaccines drags the recovery of Africa's aviation sector. And in sports, South Africa continue their impressive qualifiers run after a victory over Ethiopia. In our top story, a ruling by the International Court of Justice over a sea border row between Kenya and Somalia has sparked mixed reactions in the two East African countries. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has rejected the court's decision to hand Somalia control of most of a potentially oil and gas-rich area in the Indian Ocean. For the citizens of Somalia, however, it's a time to celebrate. ICJ judges unanimously ruled that there was no pre-existing agreement on the maritime boundary, as Kenya had claimed in its argument.
The maritime border dispute has strained the relationship between Somalia and Kenya since 2014. That's when Mogadishu filed the case at the UN's top court. And Tuesday's verdict has not eased the stalemate.
While Kenya is not surprised by the decision, it is profoundly concerned by the import of the decision and its implications for the Horn of Africa region and international law generally. At the very onset, Kenya wishes to indicate that it rejects in totality and does not recognize the findings in the decision. This decision is, in the circumstances, a zero-sum game, which will only strain the relations between our two countries. It will also reverse the social, political, and economic gains and potentially aggravate the peace and security situation in the fragile Horn of Africa region.
His Somalia counterpart, President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed, however, sees the ruling as an opportunity to strengthen ties between the two countries.
By respecting the laws and the international conventions of the world, the Somalia federal government clearly states that it abides by the decisions of the court, and we expect the neighboring country, Kenya, to respect the international rule of law and forget its ambition that is based on misleading.
Somali citizens are also happy with the outcome.
It's a big happy day for all Somali people after ICJ verdict on the Somalia-Kenya maritime dispute. The case was in court for the past 7 years. However, it's historical victory for all of us.
We should not celebrate because it's our territorial waters and we should possess it.
The ICJ's judgment is final and cannot be appealed, but the court has no means of enforcing its rulings. And with Kenya refusing to recognize its authority, it's a matter of what next. Chao Mugono, CGTN.
Well, let's bring you some analysis on this now. We are joined by the director of the Horn Institute Kenya, Dr. Hassan Kananje, who is also a practitioner specializing in conflict analysis and resolution. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Kananje. Of course, the first thing that we must note is that Kenya has rejected the ICJ's decision. So where to from here, particularly as far as enforcement is concerned?
Yeah, the challenge with international law is especially the one that comes from the ICJ, there is no credible enforcement mechanism. It doesn't have the tool to enforce it, and therefore its implementation is largely going to be based on the willingness of the parties in question to do that, absent, of course, of a Security Council resolution that forces the parties to do it. is going to be dependent just on the willingness of the two parties in question to abide by the ruling, and in which case Kenya has rejected recognition of that ruling.
What Kenya is open to doing, though, is negotiating. Somalia, on the other hand, has not expressed that sentiment. What role do you think the African Union, perhaps, or other regional bodies can play in trying to mediate the dispute between the two countries?
I think Kenya's preference for a negotiated solution, part of it is premised on the fact that traditionally issues when it comes to maritime borders, as well as even continental borders, ultimately they tend to be decided through negotiations, especially when they touch on critical national interests of sovereignty or critical resources. And within the continent, there is an African Union border mechanism. It's called African Union Border Program that actually helps in the delineation, the limitation of borders, and helps states navigate the kind of challenges that are created by border issues. But this can also be done through, of course, the existing, IGAD framework to be supported, perhaps by the United Nations, in ensuring that there is a regional and bilateral or rather resolution to the conflict. Now, the challenge, of course, of what is maybe perceived as an external imposition of borders is that the states, and especially what we have seen already, that Nairobi has not only been reluctant but has outright rejected the ruling, is that it can perpetuate and prolong the kind of dispute that exists, and therefore destabilize the region even further. Now, neither of the countries is going to be in a position to exploit whatever resources that could be in the disputed territory. And so I think a framework from the African Union can be exploited to ensure that perhaps a solution is arrived at either bilaterally or regionally.
And what about the African Union's position then on safeguarding the stability and security of its member states in this regard, particularly as there are allegations that very powerful foreign interests may be meddling or even fueling this dispute?
Unfortunately, in recent years, the Horn of Africa region in particular has become a theater of global geopolitics. And in the current maritime dispute, there is increasingly the presence of not only Western interests in particular, but also Western corporations that have played a part in actually fueling the dispute that we are seeing, in as much as they are contributing to, of course, other disputes within the region. And so it is going to be, I think, very important that there is an African mechanism in the way in which they're going to respond to this. Now, increasingly, though, both the Western interests in particular and Western corporations, their interests will not be achieved, especially with regard to the disputed area, if the dispute is going to continue. And so I think it's the best interest of everybody concerned to perhaps urge the parties to try and negotiate a settlement that is going to allow for exploitation of those resources, but also for the management of the maritime activity that is expected to take place going forward.
Well, thank you for that analysis, Dr. Kanenje, joining us from here in Kenya. Now, turning to another matter of international justice, the trial of former Central African Republic militia commander Mohamed Said continues. Said was a faction commander for the Seleka militia. ICC prosecutor Karim Khan alleges Said took part in beating and mistreating prisoners. The prosecution alleges that Said ran 2 detention centers at the time of the crimes. Prisoners at the centers were accused of supporting ousted President Francois Bozize. Said was arrested in January and transferred to The Hague. He faces accusations of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The current hearing is set to end on Wednesday.
This is as straightforward a case as is likely to come before this court. This is not a case where Your Honours are going to be challenged to look at complicated theories of liability of a military commander or a civilian superior removed from the theatre of conflict. It is a detention case. And we say the evidence overwhelmingly shows that Mr. Said was in the room where it happened. He encouraged it, he facilitated it, but he also took part in beatings and mistreatment that justifies the forms of participation that are put in the document containing charges.
La réalité à l'OCRB.
The reality of the Central Office for the Prevention of Banditry is total disorganization. In such total disorganization, no one can clearly be identified as being in charge. It's impossible. Mr. Said, as a volunteer trying to assist OCRB Commander Louis Mazangwe, is in or no way responsible for what other people will do, claiming to be in various positions. In such context of disorder, it will be impossible for the prosecution to prove the existence of any policy, of a state or organization or any common plan.
Let's go over to Lebanon now, where the investigation into last year's devastating explosion in Beirut's port has been suspended for a second time. The probe has already embroiled some of the country's top politicians. 2 arrest warrants have been issued for ex-ministers who have so far refused to cooperate with the inquiry. They've accused the judge leading the investigation of political bias and have filed lawsuits to replace him. Government officials will meet on Wednesday to discuss the case. Beirut's massive port explosion last August killed over 200 people and caused extensive damage in the city. All right, well, let's go live now to Beirut, where CGTN correspondent Mia Alberti is standing by with the latest. Mia, there has been a lot of accusations and counter-accusations over this investigation. Can you give us more details as to why there is so much wrangling over this inquiry, and of course what the reaction has been from people in Beirut?
Well, it is hard to say why these ministers are putting a case against the main judge of overseeing the investigation. But these 2 ministers that filed this complaint against the judge have actually been called for questioning, and the day that they were supposed to appear, that's the day that they put this appeal against the judge, and that's when the investigation was suspended again. And that's why people are saying that this is about politics. Today was just a protest behind me. These are the offices of the judge overseeing the investigation, and the protest here, which has since finished, was mostly people here saying that asking, if someone is innocent, why would they not appear and be part of the investigation to find out what happened in the biggest explosion in Lebanon's history. So a lot of anger of people seeing that this investigation is kind of turning into a war playground for the different sides of the politics here. We have Hezbollah also criticizing the judge, and tomorrow Hezbollah is actually going to do another protest and put some more pressure to replace this judge. But for the families of the victims, the bottom point is that they are seeing justice slipping through their fingers and no end in sight for this important investigation, which is now being tainted by the corruptions of Lebanon again.
Well, thank you so much for that, Mia Alberti, live for us there in Beirut. Now, Chile has declared a state of emergency and is deploying troops to 2 southern regions. President Sebastián Piñera announced the move Tuesday amid a growing conflict with the Mapuche indigenous people. The Mapuche are demanding a right to self-determination and the return of ancestral land taken over by farmers and logging companies. 1 person was killed and 17 injured in the capital Santiago on Sunday in clashes between security forces and protesters. The Mapuche are Chile's largest indigenous group, accounting for almost 10% of the population. A meeting of the world's biggest economies on the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan has been declared a success. An extraordinary G20 summit was convened by Italy, and a clear commitment was reached to protect human rights and tackle terrorism. Hermione Kitson reports from Rome.
Yes, it was a crucial day here in Rome as world leaders connected with Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi to discuss Afghanistan for the first time since the Taliban seized control in August. Now, G20 countries and organisations such as the World Bank, International Monetary Fund and United Nations took part in the video conference, which the Prime Minister said was a success.
In general, I would call this meeting a success because I believe it is the first time that leaders have given a multilateral response to the Afghan crisis.
One of the key issues discussed was humanitarian aid and how to ensure it reaches those who need it most. The European Union pledged just over $1 billion in funding, but the Commission President said the Taliban must adhere to its conditions to receive longer-term aid. Combating terrorism was another key point of debate. Last weekend was the bloodiest since the Taliban came into power, with the local branch of the Islamic State, ISK, claiming responsibility for an attack that claimed almost 50 lives.
A consensus was found for Afghanistan not to be allowed to return to being a kind of refuge for international terrorists. There has been a great commitment from all of the leaders on this, and in fact, among many countries, this also means coordinating their own action against terrorism.
Leaders also pledged to do whatever possible to ensure basic human rights are reinstated, such as education for girls and work for women, and ensuring a safe passage out of the country for those who want to leave. Leaders will meet again here in Rome in person at the end of the month for the G20 Proper Summit, where it's hoped further commitments can be made to help ease Afghanistan's humanitarian crisis. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Rome.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. The UN calls for investigations into the use of force by Libyan authorities against migrants. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. World leaders took turns on the virtual podium at the COP15 Biodiversity Summit in Kunming, sounding an urgent call to address biodiversity loss. More than 175 UN member nations that have ratified the Convention on Biodiversity are expected to adopt the Kunming Declaration. The declaration includes commitments to help developing nations fund their conservation efforts, even as they recover from the pandemic. CGTN's Tao Yuan reports.
The most important agenda for today is the Kunming declarations. So all parties at the conference is going to make a joint declaration. And some of the key points, one is building ecological civilization, which is a notion put forth by the Chinese President Xi Jinping to include human into the construction of the ecosystem, recognizing human as part of the natural world and not separating from it. And another is that recognizing biodiversity conservation as significant to our human health, which is a recurrent theme during the post-COVID-19 era, which was thought to have brought on by wildlife trade. And also all of this is hoped to lead up to a post-2020 framework, which is going to serve as a guiding principle for the next 10 years. And specific targets are going to set in that post-2020 framework as to how much forest, wetland, water, and other wild area that the human society as a whole is going to restore in the next 10 years, how many wild species that we're going to remove from the endangered species list, and how many more people in the world that we're going to ensure have access to clean water. So setting goals is important, but this year around the hope is that implementation is going to be all the more important.
Meanwhile, there's been reactions to Chinese President Xi Jinping's keynote address at the COP15 Leaders Summit. Let's listen to what Zambian experts have had to say about President Xi's speech.
listened to the speech made by the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, and the very first thing that stands out for me is the theme for the Biodiversity Convention Conference, working together to build a community of all life on Earth. If you notice what's been going on over the last few years worldwide, we've all focused so much on development, and development that's not taken into account consequences on the environment. So it's good to have a theme that focuses on life.
I think the move that China has taken is good because the influence that China holds now in the global community is quite huge. And not only that, China also has huge influence in our own country here because there are a lot of investments that China has made through various businesses, and so we believe that would be a good thing.
Egyptian experts have also praised China for its commitment to fund biodiversity programs in developing nations with about $230 million in donations. They hope the funds will go a long way towards climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts.
The Chinese initiative is very important, especially to poor countries whose economy is limited. They need two programs, a program to reduce emission of greenhouse gases and a program for adoption. China is a huge industrial and agricultural country. Therefore, when it announces commitment to help developing countries meet environmental goals, we should then thank China twice, once for changing its domestic policies and second for supporting other countries.
The concept of raising a fund to support developing countries to maintain their biodiversity is very important to mankind in general. The biodiversity, it's a resource, very important resource for the world, because it has genetic secrets that are not known yet. If we lose, or if biological creatures extinct, or plants for this matter, so we lose it with all the secrets that can have a help to mankind.
The UN Human Rights Office has called for a prompt, thorough, impartial and independent investigation into the use of force by Libyan authorities against migrants and asylum seekers. The announcement comes after armed forces in Tripoli conducted a series of mass arrests last week. More than 4,000 people have been detained in overcrowded detention centers. Nokutula Shabalala has that story.
Since Sunday, hundreds of migrants and refugees have been waiting outside a United Nations center in Tripoli. They are looking for help to escape Libya. That's following a violent crackdown in which thousands were arrested.
Last week, there was a series of major incidents, beginning on October 1st, when Ministry of Interior personnel raided an informal settlement in Gergaresh, about 12 kilometers west from the capital, Tripoli, where hundreds of migrants and asylum seekers live, including people registered with the UN Refugee Agency, who were waiting completion of their resettlement procedures.
The UN's Human Rights Office says women, children and men were taken in handcuffs by Libyan security forces. At least one person died, 5 were injured and more than 4,000 were detained. The Human Rights Organization has slammed the use of force.
We call on the authorities to establish prompt, thorough, impartial, and independent investigations into the claims of unnecessary and disproportionate use of force, including the allegations of killings by the security forces and affiliated groups, with a view to hold those responsible accountable. Victims have the right to justice and reparations. We also call on the Libyan authorities to release all arbitrarily detained migrants and asylum seekers, cease their raids on their settlements and halt evicting them, as well as stop criminalizing them.
Libya became a major transit point for people seeking to reach Europe. But migrants say they have faced violent abuse and extortion in the North African country.
We are extremely worried about the continued suffering of migrants and asylum seekers in Libya, who are experiencing a myriad of daily violations and abuses at the hands of both state and non-state actors.
Libya's government of national unity says they are trying to deal with the complex issue of illegal migration. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
In Uganda, the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted food supply chains, resulting in the loss of markets for producers and distributors. Government figures show that farmers are losing about 40% of the food produced during and after harvest. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
Domazo Mukasa is preparing to market his produce, but some of the tomatoes are already going to waste.
I am sorting out the best for the customers, and the rotten ones will be taken away by the cleaners to the dump site.
And he's not the only one making losses here. Aisha Nakiwala's eggplants are drying up.
The customers are few, so if you take more days without selling, things get spoiled.
The closure of much of the hospitality industry and schools to curb the spread of COVID-19 has reduced consumption for some goods. Some of these institutions usually buy in bulk. Much of what has been brought here has gone to waste. Vendors here say they lack modern storage facilities to keep their products fresh. This is worrying food experts.
The amount of food that Uganda produces, half of that is lost in post-harvest losses, right? Half of that. That is a huge amount. And yet Uganda is able to feed itself and also feed neighboring countries.
The vendors are now requesting local authorities to help them install better storage facilities.
For instance, when you take out the eggplants, we can store them for 2 days in a refrigeration, but to add on value and not make losses, we can get powder out of the eggplants if you can get such machines.
The government has heard their plea.
It is recorded, you are right, that we have been losing 40% of what we produce. But we are trying to ensure that these losses are minimized by advising farmers, getting them together, working together in a cooperative, providing drying areas, handling to ensure that we regulate the sector. So through this intervention, we shall be able to control.
It is hoped that these and many other initiatives will help vendors like Mukasa to reduce food loss and make more money. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And coming up in your business news. A slow rollout of COVID-19 vaccines drags the recovery of Africa's aviation sector. And Egyptian car sales get a boost in August, moving up by 15%.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The slow rollout of COVID-19 vaccines is dragging the recovery of the aviation sector in Africa. That's according to the International Air Travel Association. The association says Africa is lagging behind other regions in its vaccine rollout, which will impact international travel recovery. Airlines in the region are expected to post a $1.5 billion net loss next year. IATA says the airline industry is facing an uneven recovery from the pandemic, and that regions with large domestic markets, faster vaccination rollouts and less restrictive government policy will recover faster than other parts of the world. Passenger car sales in Egypt have continued to strengthen in August, rising 15% compared to the same period last year. Now, according to the Automotive Information Council, local distributors moved some 18,300 units during the month, up from 15,900 in August 2020. On a monthly basis, sales rose 3% from the 17,800 in July. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more.
Car sales in August have continued their upward trajectory amid a steady rise in demand.
The lack of cars in the market last year during the pandemic have prevented clients from buying their needs. Therefore, a large number of consumers this year had the appetite to go purchase the cars they wanted. Now there is huge demand that exceeds supply, so much that dealers are selling at overprice.
What attracted attention in the monthly auto report is that trucks and buses have seen the highest sales increase amongst all vehicles, recording a hike of 32% year on year.
August is the last month before school begins. There is more demand for minibuses, trucks, and other vehicles for transport services. Meanwhile, there is a short supply of private cars. The alternative apparent in August were buses and small trucks for these reasons. First, banks are strongly financing these vehicles. Second, the showrooms and dealers that can't find private cars have transferred their capital into trucks and buses. Third, car-hailing companies like Uber and Careem, who can't find drivers with private cars, have introduced new transport services using small trucks, minibuses, and small vans. All this pushed the sales of this type by 32 to 33%.
The numbers seem to reflect a sense of optimism for the Egyptian auto market, whose automotive industry is one of the sectors benefiting from the wider economic uplift. However, some experts like Ala El-Saba, owner of El-Saba Automotive, warns the future might not be so rosy amid a semiconductor shortage.
There are several problems that will reduce sales next period. No doubt, the semiconductors are the main reasons that's causing the global problem. Its absence has led to a big drop in production in many companies. The parent companies sent to us and the distributors warning us not to book any cars for the short term. They won't be sending new cars till the end of the year.
What makes it worse is that sales are expected to fall again in the last quarter of 2021, despite the increased demand.
Because there are no cars to buy in the first place, demand hasn't dropped. People have the appetite to buy, but supply is low. There is no clear vision of when production of semiconductors will resume. Car producers are on the waiting list for semiconductors, and it's a long waiting list that exceeds 6 months.
There is fear a continuation of this shortage could have a damaging effect on the Egyptian auto market that has been slowly rebounding from the effects of the coronavirus-led recession. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
To Uganda now, where mobile telecom operator MTN Uganda has officially opened its initial public offering to sell 20% of its shareholding to the public. This follows approval from the Capital Markets Authority and the Uganda Securities Exchange. The offer price has been set at 0.056 cents per share. CGTN's Isabel Nakiria reports.
Ugandans now have a chance to own a piece of MTN Uganda. The mobile telecom operator has offered to sell 4.5 billion shares. The telecom giant hopes to raise $240 million from the initial public offering.
We wanted to achieve localization through listing. We wanted to make sure that as many as possible Ugandans can get access to applying for a share.
MTN Uganda has 15 million phone subscribers and also offers mobile financial services. The decision to list is in line with the new license requirements by the government, which compel all telecom companies with a national operator's permit to list at least 20% of their shares. MTN says its priority goal now is to drive local ownership of its business across the markets in which the company operates. The company has opened a mobile IPO that will allow buyers to purchase shares using their telephone mobile money accounts.
When using the MIPO platform for applying for MTN Uganda shares, you will get 10 bonus shares for every 100 shares you apply for.
While priority will be given to Uganda, the shares will also be floated to other East African community investors. The IPO is expected to boost the number of retail investors at the Uganda Securities Exchange from about 40,000 to 200,000.
Provides diversification for investors to be able to invest in a new market segment, in a new company and a new sector within the economy.
The IPO is expected to close in 6 weeks. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Nigeria has earned itself the title of Africa's Bitcoin nation. An unstable naira is contributing to the popularity of the cryptocurrency, but Nigeria's central bank remains critical of Bitcoin. It barred local banks from working with cryptocurrencies in February, warning of severe regulatory sanctions. Even so, Nigeria's appetite for crypto has only increased, as CGTN's Najma Abdirazak reports.
Sly Maginda has been producing artwork since 2017. Like a growing number of Nigerian artists, the 27-year-old is selling his pieces on cryptocurrency platforms after COVID-19 lockdowns made traditional exhibitions difficult.
The naira is digressing, and we're trying to keep the value of the art. So cryptocurrency currently is going on the right direction, and the world is jumping on it because we're in a digital world, like I said. So crypto is just something good for the arts to move forward. So that's the currency where people don't think that I'm paying too much or I'm paying less.
Nigerians are turning to crypto for business to protect their savings as the country's fiat currency, the naira, continues to lose value. Nigeria's central bank banned local banks from working with cryptocurrencies in February, warning of severe regulatory sanctions. In August, it also froze the accounts of some crypto users for allegedly sourcing funds from illegal foreign exchange dealers. The move, however, has not stopped Nigeria's appetite for crypto.
I'm just beginning to realize how late I am joining the crypto market, because this is one thing that has already gone far, but I feel it's still not too late. Crypto is the future. Digital currency is the future. Everything is going digitalized now, and I think it's something we really need to roll with.
According to research firm Chain Analysis, in March, just after the central bank ban, the dollar volume of cryptocurrencies sent from Nigeria rose to $132 million, up 17% from the previous month. Transactions in June were above 25%, above the same month last year. Peer-to-peer platform Paxful also experienced a 57% rise in trading volume in Nigeria in the year to June, while user numbers surged 83%. Paxful recently opened an office in Abuja to lobby the government to change its attitude to crypto.
Everything begins with education, and what we're seeing is the Nigerian people are exceptionally hungry and receptive for this education. It's only in Africa when you start talking about cryptocurrency not as a means of investment or speculation, but as a means of exchange, that people get really excited. And what we've seen is the Nigerian youth have built their own businesses, offering financial services for their friends and family.
According to data retrieved from Google Trend, Nigeria, Africa's biggest economy in GDP terms, has been adjudged as the only country with a perfect score on interest in Bitcoin. That appetite is expected to even grow further as many Nigerians shift their spending habits to embrace digital currencies. Najma Abdirizak, CGTN.
A shortage of coal is putting pressure on many of China's power plants. To cope with the situation, major coal mining regions in the country have ramped up production to ease the shortage. Northern China's Shaanxi province, known as the country's coal capital, is no exception. A CGTN reporter Hu Chao has more.
Coal production lines are working at full capacity at the Tongxing coal mine of the Jingneng Holding Coal Industry Group in the coal capital of Datong in North China's Shaanxi province. The state-owned group is the largest coal company in the province, with its headquarters based in the capital city of Taiyuan. The Tongxing coal mine is a major supplier of power coal in China, with an annual production capacity exceeding 10 million tons. Over the past Golden Week holiday, more than 700 of their employees kept working to expand production to meet the surging energy demand across the country.
During the national holiday, Tongxing Coal Mine produced 154,000 tons of coal, an increase of 11,000 tons over the same period of last year. We've also increased daily freight train lines from 2 to 3.
Tongxing is among many coal mines of the Jingneng Holding Group that have unleashed advanced production capacity to increase supply. They've been striving to enhance working efficiency at all chains. As winter approaches, the priority is to keep residents warm. The group has also reduced the coal transportation for uses other than power and heat. As commissioned by the central government, Shaanxi just signed mid- and long-term contracts to supply coal to 14 regions in the country. The Jingneng Holding Group now sends coal to 6 regions: Jilin, Anhui, Zhejiang, and Jiangsu provinces, the Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region, and Shanghai.
We've actively communicated with the 6 regions to ensure supply for them. During the National Day holiday, we produced 8.8 million tons of coal, an increase of 400,000 tons than planned.
Official figures show Shaanxi now has more than 660 coal mines. The recent heavy rainfalls forced 60 of them to suspend production. But local officials say now only 4 of them remain halted, while all the others are back to work. The temporary suspension won't affect Shaanxi's coal output. Hu Chao, CGTN, Shaanxi Province.
India is also facing a shortage of coal. The government has asked local power producers to import up to 10% of their coal needs. Officials say with joint efforts, the situation could get back to normal in the next few days. Ravinder Bauer has more.
Well, it all began when some states started raising concerns regarding low levels of coal stocks to run thermal power stations. And then it all began when more and more states joined in the chorus and put pressure on the central government, which was trying to ignore these demands, which was trying to downplay these demands. And now the Prime Minister's office is reviewing the supply situation. The Home Minister has already held an emergency meeting with the ministers in charge of coal and power ministries on Monday. Many states have expressed their concerns to the centre after weekend power outages, although the government has said that these fears are unfounded, assuring that there are enough coal stocks to meet the rising demand. Reports of states scrambling for power have already started coming in, especially from Rajasthan, Jharkhand and Bihar, which have experienced power cuts lasting up to 14 hours. In October, India has always recorded a peak demand across the country. The strict lockdown from April to June 2021 impacted mining, so not many stocks were built up. This year, monsoon has lasted longer, and that has affected the production as mines have been still full of water. The Indian Railways is getting ready for supplying more coal to these thermal power plants. The Indian Railways says that they have the capacity to supply around 500 rakes daily. The coal minister has once again reassured the nation that they have enough supply to run power plants so that there will be no danger of a blackout. Ravinder Bava, CGTN, Delhi.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Reactions from Nigeria as government grants paternity leave for civil servants.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
New fathers in Nigeria are now entitled to 2 weeks paternity leave. It is the most recent reform in the country's civil service in 13 years, and many see it as a major milestone for the West African country, where childcare is considered a woman's obligation. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports.
Israel Pender is a second-time dad. He's been excited about caring for his newborn, but he's not been able to get the much-needed time off work. Now he sees the 2-week paternity leave approved by government as a step in the right direction, but he doesn't think it's enough.
I think it's a very good thing that the government has done, or if the government can look into it and consider the huge impact fathers can make in terms of, assisting their wives and helping to bond with the newborn babies, I think the government should even extend the time.
All a new mom needs is an extra hand, really. The support of someone to help with the baby. It's invaluable. Your parents can't always be available. They come for the first one because most times you're so new at that first experience. But the second time, they might not have the luxury of having your parents come over. So having your partner with you is really invaluable.
The paternity leave debate has been ongoing in Nigeria for decades now. Parliament turned down a paternity leave bill in 2018. Lawmakers said culture and the economy weren't prepared for it. Now the government's taking steps to change the norm.
When their spouses or wives have given birth to a newborn baby, or if the husband and wife have just adopted a baby of less than 4 months, then the man is entitled to paternity leave of about 14 days. So that is what has been approved for men, so that the men and their babies also can bond well together.
This is the first time since 2008 that the federal government is reforming its civil service rules. Nigeria now joins African countries like Kenya, Algeria, Mali and Tanzania in approving the father-friendly policy. Many here want to see government further extend the time to enable new fathers bond better with their babies and help ease the pressure off of their spouses. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Your sports news coming up next. South Africa continue their impressive qualifiers run after victory over Ethiopia.
How would you create your legend?